So we briefly saw what Dataverse really meant. So Dataverse is actually the data repository that is available as a shared component within your Power Platform family. So you can store data from disparate data sources and you can use it within your Power Platform applications. So what does Dataverse allow you to do? So you can go ahead and create a data model using Dataverse. So data modeling, as you know, it is a process where you can understand the data requirements to support your business needs. So if I want to define a data model, some of the key things that I have to do first is to identify the list of tables where I'll be collecting the data. So tables are nothing but a container to hold your data. It is also called as entity. So if you look at some of the Power Apps or Dataverse screens, like you may see the word entity, entity and table are more or less the same. Then you have to define the column. So I have got a table, and then the next thing is I need to say like, okay, what are the data elements that I'm going to capture? So that's what we call it as column. So this is a container for a piece of data within a table. So column is also called as field. So then next step is building a relationship. So when I have got a table with a list of columns, another table with a list of columns, how do I build a relationship between the tables? A classic thing is like a relationship between a customer and an account, contact and an account, or I have got an invoice header and an invoice detail, sales order and a sales order line. So these are tables, but you know, when you look at these tables, you have to establish a relationship between these tables to get meaningful data out of that. And of course, there will be metadata, which comprises of the definition for tables, columns, and relationships. So you have a table called sales order. The definition is what does the table uh, is actually capturing. So what does it contain? Columns, each and every column, you need to have a definition of what data element it is capturing. And relationships, what is the purpose of the relationship? What is the type of relationship it is? And what is the purpose of those relationships? So these are what we call it as metadata that you will be capturing about your data itself. There are other things that you will be doing in terms of a table. So understanding the ownership, who owns the table, what are the different activity tables that are associated with that, areas that display this table, what are the processes that will be using this table, how do you initiate a communication and collaboration with those tables. Auditing plays an important role. So for instance, like, okay, which columns changes need to be audited, or whether the entire table change need to be audited, and so on. So there are a lot of other attributes that you will be thinking about when it comes to defining a table within Microsoft Dataverse. So we talked about tables a bit. Let us quickly talk a little bit about relationships, because relationships is an important thing that you have to consider when it comes to data model. So most of the times you have to create relationships between multiple Dataverse tables. So why a relationship is really important? Because you need to understand like, okay, how different tables unite with each other. So here when I say relationship, these are the lines I'm talking about. These are the ones that define how these tables are related to each other. So just to give you an example. So for instance, in our real life, right, we have relationships. So we say like, okay, my mom, my dad, my uncle, my auntie. So similar to that, like when you have tables, like there should be some sort of relationship between these tables. A simple example is like you go to a store which has got many shelves, and each shelf will be allocated with one or more product categories, and you may have multiple instances of the same product under each category and the type. Similarly, you may have a shopping basket, and then you may have one or more products within the shopping basket. So these are some of the examples where you can see like how relationships are really important. So you can have in this diagram, as you can see, these are four tables, they are related. So here it showcases a customer can have multiple associated sales orders. So you can see a customer is linked with a sales order. A single customer, that's what this means. It's a one-to-many relationship. A single customer can have a number of sales orders, and you can have a single sales order can have a multiple number of sales order lines. So single sales order may have a number of order lines, and you can have the sales order line will be linked to a product. So each sales order line, you will be talking about a product. What is the product, the quantity of the product that you are ordering. So as you can see here, quite easily, like when you start looking at these diagrams, you can understand the relationship between the data. And this is really important. The reason I'm just spending a lot of time on this slide is because when it comes to data model, relationships play an important role. So you have to really understand how these data are related to each other. The reason for this emphasis I'm doing is sometimes you will be starting from, you won't have a data model, right? So you will have a problem statement from your stakeholders. You understand what data needs to be captured. And then you come back here and then you need to start mapping them out. And one thing which you will be doing, especially if you're building if you're building a data model from scratch, is understanding how you establish the relationships between the tables. So you have to pay a lot of time and attention around these details. And also, like once you have your initial data model, always go and validate it with your stakeholders just to make sure whether your understanding is correct there. So there are a number of relationship types. So we talked about relationship. One of the relationship type is 1:n. So which is nothing but one-to-many relationship. And this is the most common type of relationship you find in Dataverse applications. So for instance, you can think about a venue holding multiple events, or a company can have multiple employees. So these are all some of the examples like of a 1-to-n relationship. So what are the characteristics of this relationship? You have one record of in the primary table, and in the child or the related table, you can have 0, 1 or many records. So like as in the previous example, we said like you can have a customer relates to a set of sales orders. So it doesn't mean every single customer needs to have a sales order. A customer can have a sales order or one sales order or one-to-many sales order in there. Or some customers may not even have a sales order in the sales order table. So sometimes you may see 1-to-n versus n-to-1. It's all about how, from which angle you are looking at the relationship. So if I'm looking at from the angle of customer to sales order, it's a 1-to-n. But if I'm looking at from the angle of sales order to customer table, what is the relationship? It's a n-to-1. So when it comes to 1-to-n or n-to-1, it is more around like how, in which angle you are looking at the relationship. So that is what you need to understand. So n-to-1 is a reverse of a 1-to-n relationship. So the next relationship type is n-to-n, which is many-to-many relationship. So many-to-many relationship, most of the times, so why do you want to have that? So for instance, like you can have accounts, and you can have accounts can having many contacts, and a contact can be belong to multiple accounts also. So which is a many-to-many relationship. Uh, in a banking scenario, a customer having accounts, and an account can be related to multiple customers. So that is again an end-to-end relationship. So when it comes to end-to-end relationship, the Dataverse handles it in a better way. So behind the scene, it will create a special hidden table, or it will call it as like a related or a relationship or an intersect table. So this table will have an end-to-one relationship. So if you look at here, events and contacts, they are sharing an end-to-end relationship. You will be defining as an end-to-end relationship in Dataverse, but what you don't know is what happens behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, there will be an intersect table that will be created, and that will maintain a one-to-one relationship between these two hidden table and events. and a one-to-one relationship between event table, the contact table, and the intersect table. So the ability of achieving end-to-end relationship can be done with the help of this hidden intersect table. And end-to-end relationships are getting more and more common these days. And if you have the ability of using them inside your Dataverse environment. What is the key purpose of having these relationships? Because these relationships, they determine the behavior of your data. So for instance, like some things that you have to think about is what should happen when a primary record is deleted. We looked at the example where a customer is linked with a sales header, right, or the sales order record. So if the customer is deleted, what do we do with the sales order? Because do we just hold on to the sales order, or do we delete all the sales order associated with the customer also? So that's where the particular relationship behavior comes into play. So relationship behavior, basically, like, it was mainly used to preserve your data integrity, and you can use it for your roll-up activity, and you can automate business processes. And so relationship behavior is going to be really key when you are defining relationships. The first thing you will be looking here is like, okay, what is the type of relationship here? Is it a referential integrity? If in this case, like what happens when I delete the table from a parent table or a primary record table, what happens to the child records? You can specify cascade all, which means like, okay, delete all the child tables associated when the parent table gets deleted. Or you can say cascade none, which is basically telling like, okay, don't delete my child records when you delete the parent table. So as a functional consultant, you need to understand like, okay, what should be the data integrity? I think we saw a slide where when we talked about data, one of the things you need to understand is about the data integrity. And the next thing is like how long you need to hold the data for, which is your age of the data that you need to define. So the key point to highlight here is relationship behaviors are really important to understand, and you need to get it right so that you can just design your data model appropriately. So hierarchical relationships. So in Dataverse, like, you can also enable hierarchies for your custom tables. Let me quickly showcase to you before we jump further on to this is, let me jump onto Power Apps. So I keep on talking about Dataverse, right? So you can actually access your Dataverse tables in here. So you can go and hit on the data and you can see tables. So here it is going to bring all the tables associated within this particular environment. So each environment you can have a single Dataverse database associated with that. If you noticed one thing, so we have a sample database that is configured. So when I provisioned this environment, I can go ahead and create a sample database. So let me quickly show you what I mean. So if you want to create a new environment, right? Like for instance, I want to create a dev environment, I want to create a UAT environment or a production environment. I go to admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. So here I will be logging with my credentials, and that will allow me to create the environment. So while this is loading, the environment, when I provision it, it will allow me to decide on whether I want to create a database as part of the provisioning of the environment. So when I say database, pretty much this is the Dataverse database I'm talking about. Sorry, I have to move the screen because that will be much faster in getting the things loaded. Okay, as you can see here, I can go ahead and create a new environment. So here I can say like prod environment, specify what type of license you want to assign to that, like a production. So this is the key part I was mentioning about. So when you say I want to create a database for this environment, you can turn it on. And as part of creating it, it is going to go and create a database using the Dataverse as a data store for you. And that's what I have done for this environment, which I have created. So once you create environments, it will be listed here. So you can choose dev environment, and if the environment is pointing here dev, then probably you are working in the dev landscape. Okay, so getting back to our Dataverse here. So these are some of the standard tables that you can see. So standard tables, they are part of the common data model which I mentioned, and any new tables that you will be creating will be part of your custom tables. So you will see all the standard tables here when I start creating a new table, and this will become like a custom table. I'll showcase that shortly when we look into this. That's a typical Dataverse environment, how you will go ahead and start creating your tables and relationships. So when you create a table, one of the things you can also define is your column data types. And the Dataverse supports a whole heap of data types that you can think of. So this includes like a single line of text, the choice, currency, date and time, lookup, one image, decimal number, calculated columns, and quite a few things that you can see here. Status reason, unique identifier, whole number, roll up column. So every single type of column data type that you can think of, you can quite easily create that with the Dataverse environment. So some of the columns that you can create is your simple column, calculated column, and roll up column. Simple column is basically is not based on a formula, so you can just load data in there. Calculated column is you will be performing calculations, and this will be either from the current table or related parent table. So for instance, you can have a full name, which is a concatenation of your first name and surname. Roll up column, sometimes you have to just aggregate certain rows and you need to provide the value. And that's if you want to do an aggregation and then store the value in there, you define that as a roll up column. Okay, so let us quickly look at how do you go about creating a table and adding a column inside Dataverse. So here I'm going to create a demo table, and here that's what the primary key column, I'm going to give it as a name, or you can just choose it like an ID if you need to. So it doesn't need to be always like a name in here. So then the next thing I'll be doing here is like if you want to enable attachments, you can enable it here. So you can write a description about the table, and you can use whether it's a standard table type or an activity table type. So I'll go ahead and create this simple table, which is a demo table. So as you can see here, all of a sudden my table type become custom, and now I have got a name here. So now I can start adding additional columns. So I can just say like first name, and I can choose the different data types as I mentioned. So as you can see, whole heap of data types available in here, and you can also make the decision around like, okay, what is the table text, the type, or whether it's going to be searchable or not. So once you choose your things, then I can just add it here. So as you can see here, you can specifically see what your custom ones are and what are the standard ones are. Sometimes like if you want to see only the custom ones, you can apply the filter here. So here I have got my first name and my name listed in here, and I can go and see whether it's a required column or an optional column. Of course, like once I create multiple tables, I can start building relationships in here. So again, here relationship will start defining whether it is a many to one or a one to many type of relationship. So now I have got some columns in here. I will just go ahead and save this. So this is as simple as how you typically go inside Dataverse, and you will go ahead and create your table and columns in here. So here I just created a simple table. If I go back to the list of tables and again apply the filter to say custom, so I can see my custom tables here. And if I say like show me everything, it will also bring me all the standard tables in here. So standard tables or tables that are created out of the box, custom tables or tables that you are going to create specific to your needs. Wherever possible, use the standard table. So if you need an account table, you don't need to go and create a custom account table. try and use whether you can use your account table that is coming as a standard table and it has got all the attributes that you are looking for. That is an important thing to understand because don't rush and create your own custom tables if you don't need to, and always try and use the standard tables whatever you want to create. So here I need to go get back to all. So that is going to give. So as you can see, Microsoft have really spent a lot of time extending, creating these standard tables with all the attributes that are really important. So try to make use of them wherever possible. So that showcased to you how quickly you can add a column and a table within the Dataverse environment. The next step is around auditing. So you can actually enable table level or attribute level auditing using in the Dataverse environment. So make sure that you do the activity logging and that is available only for production instances, and always like decide on like the duration, like how long the audit information need to be stored for. So you can easily enable auditing using your admin platform admin center. So you can go to the admin center and you can easily enable the auditing that you require. So then comes your business rules. So one of the key thing in Dataverse that you can do is you can enforce business rules for the common set of requirements. So if you say like, okay, a particular data attribute is required, you can go ahead and define that, or you can add additional business rules based on the context of the table. So you may be wondering like, why should I create a business rule at the Dataverse environment level? So why can't I just hold it in my application? So think about a scenario like you may have a Power Apps application trying to update an Dataverse table. You may also have a Power App, Power Automate flow trying to update the same Dataverse table, which means when you're writing business rules, sometimes you have to write it in both the places. So if it is a data related business rule, you can apply that at the Dataverse level, which means that you can go ahead and create them quite easily in Dataverse rather than try to create in each and every application. So if I want to quickly show you how you go about creating the business rules. So this is our custom demo table that we created. Under business rules tab, you can go ahead and add a new business rule that you require. So that is quite simple as it is in how do you go about and generate a business rule at the Dataverse environment level. So this is trying to open up creating a new business rule here, and you can go ahead and start creating your business rule using the business rule designer. So as you can see here, this is again using a graphical user interface that you are going to create a business rule. So what is the condition? And if the condition is met, what message need to be stored and whether this is a required or not. So a lot of people ask that question, why do I need to create a business rule at the Dataverse level? Exactly for that reason I mentioned. But sometimes like if you don't want to do that, then make sure that you are creating that in the appropriate client applications that is going to update your Dataverse tables. So this is the business rules designer, which I showed you so that you can use to create your business rules. And you can go and create your new business rule. You can save them. And here the condition is check if the credit limit is over over $1,000. Then in that case, like there is a approval request is required. So you can define these business rules quite easily. So workflows, again, you can define in Dataverse. This is mainly to automate your business processes without a user interface. Normally, like you can create durable or long-running workflows, and you can initiate the workflow automation based on the data that is arriving inside the Dataverse environment. So you can create classic workflows, or you can go ahead and use the Power Automate flows if you need to use it. So keep that in mind. Workflows, you can actually go ahead and create them within the Dataverse environment. So the key thing about workflows is the workflows are configurable. As consultants, business consultants, you will be able to go ahead and edit the workflow without the need of developer expertise. And these workflows are modular and reusable also. So you can create workflows as templates and you can reuse them. And these I'm calling about classic workflows. So these classic workflows, you can go ahead and just say like, okay, this is the name of the workflow and this is what I want to initiate it. So when the workflow is ready to run, so you can run that when a record gets created or when the status gets updated or when a record gets deleted. So understand the business requirements. So then that will help you to configure the workflow so that at what point the workflow need to be triggered and whether like you want to run any child workflows as part of that process. And sometimes a few things to consider when you are building workflows is, does it need to be real time or can you run that in the background itself? So we talked about Dataverse, right? And the next thing is around AI Builder. So AI Builder adds like AI capabilities to your Power Platform applications. And this is to bring AI capabilities to your apps. And if you're using AI Builder, all the underlying data will be stored inside the Dataverse environment. So you create models and then you have to train the model, but the data will be expected to be sitting inside the Dataverse or other cloud data sources. So a few things that you can do with AI Builder is you can do prediction, you can do text extraction from images, you can recognize and count items in images, like you can extract, do classification, sentiment analysis over the text and so on. So with AI Builder, you can build and train a model. So AI Builder comes up with two different types of things. One is your custom models and pre-built models. So pre-built model is you don't need to create your own model, and custom model is you will build your own model. So just to give you a scenario where this will be used is, so think about a custom model where you have got a form, right? A PDF form or something that is more specific to your organization. Microsoft may not know about the type of forms that you're using in your organization, but what they give you ability is to use a forms processing module. So this you can use to create your model for your type of form. But if you look at other things like sentiment analysis, you need to just give a piece of text. So that text is more generic. So if you have generic needs, then there is you can use the pre-built models. If you have specific business needs, then you will go and create your custom model. So with AI Builder, the process is quite simple. So you create the model, you publish your model, and then you consume your model. And that's what pretty much that you will be doing with your AI Builder. So the reason I gave AI Builder is just to understand, like if you're using AI Builder, you will be also saving the data in the Dataverse environment. From that perspective, when we look at Dataverse, you can see where AI Builder fits into that picture. Of course, you can set up a lot of administration related things in the Microsoft Power Platform Admin Center. One of the thing I showed you was like how you go about creating your environment there, right? So that is available as part of the Power Platform Admin Center. Duplicate detection. So this is again an important thing. Look, when it comes to data, you want to keep the data as much as clean as possible. So one of the common problem that you can get in data, especially if you don't have business rules or if you have captured legacy data, it's basically identifying the duplicates in data. So you need to be alerting people saying, okay, there is an issue around the data and how do you go and detect the potential duplicates in the data. So the duplicate detection settings, once you configure that, it will alert you. So one of the key thing is like it doesn't stop you, it provides you a warning. And you know like this is a duplicate, but the system will allow you to still create it. So make sure that you have appropriate business rules to handle that. Data import, which you can really do. So when we talk about Dataverse, right, one thing we have been thinking about, how do I import the data? So you have the ability to import data inside your Power Apps Dataverse environment by clicking on Get Data, and you can just get the data from a spreadsheet. Or you can also input the data by edit data in the Excel spreadsheet. So which means you will be populating all the columns that is required or mandatory, and then you can save the data directly in your Dataverse table. So really handy if you want to store your data in there. The next thing is around using data flows. So data flows is again provides you the ability in order to do data transformations. So when you have data, normally like sometimes you won't get clean data, especially if you're pulling it from downstream sources. So that's where you can use data flows in order to clean the data and transform it and then load it into Dataverse environment. So rather than taking the bad data and loading it into Dataverse, you can use data flows to clean the data before you put that inside your Dataverse environment. Dataverse also supports you to use the data integrator tool or other third-party tools to import data. So you can take the data from a source and put it into any destination quite easily. So the source can be your Dataverse, or your target or the destination can be your Dataverse, doesn't matter. Same thing, you have the ability, like how I showed you that you can import the data. Similarly, you have the ability to export the data. You may be thinking like, why do I need to export the data? So you need to export the data because the data may be required for downstream reporting purposes. And that's where like you can set up a continuous push of the data from your Dataverse into your data lake storage Gen 2. So normally people use data lake storage Gen 2 for their reporting and analytics purposes. So as I mentioned before, like because the data is now exposed in for reporting purposes, you can start building your reports, and you can just run reports which is going to pull the data from your Dataverse environments. So you can run out of the box reports or create custom reports. And normally these type of reports can be accessed within Power Apps, which we will be discussing in tomorrow's module around like how like reports and views or can be exposed within the Power Apps applications. You also have the ability to share Word templates and Excel templates within the environment. So you can use the Dataverse rows as part of those templates. So because you want to generate a letter or you want to generate a mail merge type of thing, you should be able to use your Dataverse data inside any of these templates quite easily. So this is your Word templates, and similarly that you can use it for your Excel templates also. Last but not the least is around security. So security again is more important. When you are deploying a Dataverse environment or tables, you need to understand like who is going to access the data. So do I need what teams are going to access the data, what business units are going to use it, how am I what security roles I'm going to create, do I need to enable column level security? So there are some people can see certain columns or not, and how do I define the data loss prevention policies in here? So as a functional consultant, you have to capture all the security requirements so you can just feed them directly as your building blocks. So if you look at a typical business unit structure example, this is how I'll be looking at. So I have got a business unit root, and I have got multiple business units who wants to share it. So then you have got the business unit hierarchy like sales or support, and then within sales you have got wholesale again. So as you can see here that you can build a hierarchy of the groups, and then you can start defining the security rules. So what each and every group can do in terms of the security rules. So this is an important thing to define within the environment what you have got. In Dataverse, the security rights defines on which data can be updated by whom. So what does that provide you? So if you look at the security roles, the key things are the access levels. Who can create a record? Who can read a record? Who can write a record? Who can delete it? Who can append or who can share that record? So these are some of the things that you will be using. So you may create a security role like a sales manager, but the sales manager will have defined a set of permissions on the specific set of entities as defined here. So this is an important point to understand as a functional consultant. You define the security matrix and then you can hand it over to your developers to implement that. So then teams, as you know, teams is again an important concept within your environment, especially like whether you use in Teams in Dataverse, it's up to you. So if you want to use Teams in Dataverse, basically you have to create a different set of teams. For instance, I may have a HR team or I may have a finance managers team. So you can create a security hierarchy at the team level or you can do it at a role level. So sometimes you can also configure hierarchical security. So you can allow managers to access the roles of their subordinates and so on. So this is where the manager hierarchy and position hierarchy are really important. So it's not about just your records. You can also see your subordinate records and you can process them accordingly. So as you can see in Dataverse, one of the key thing here is we can use standard tables, you can do custom tables, and then you can start creating columns, and then you can assign data types, you can assign security permissions, and so on. And you can also define business rules within your Dataverse environment. So pretty much that's what we covered. So we understood what environments are and how do you go about creating an environment using admin.powerplatform.com. We created tables, we created columns, and we saw what relationships are and what are the types of relationships that you can create with Dataverse. We understood the difference between Dataverse and common data model. So common data model is a set of entities that are exposed for you, and Dataverse shows some standard entities, and then you can create some custom entities or tables within that. We also looked at some use cases and limitations of business rules, why at what point you create those business rules in the Dataverse environment rather than in the client applications itself. So hope that would have given you a good introduction about Dataverse. And let us quickly do some knowledge check here. Your manager has built a solution using Microsoft Dataverse using a few of the standard tables included out of the box. He wants to capture the date that new records are added to the entity, but he isn't sure how. He notices that the date field is already inside his entity, but he wants the field to have a custom name of date confirmed. What would you recommend that he can do? Create a new table with the name date confirmed. Use the built-in date column within the table to store the date values, but rename the column to date confirmed, or create a new environment with the name date confirmed. Cool. So when you are building a solution in Dataverse, it is always a best practice to use out of the box tables and columns wherever possible. So that's what I mentioned to you. So here already the table has a date column. So you can simply rename the column if needed, and that would be the recommended solution for this scenario. So wherever possible, always use the out of the box columns. One of your co-workers has set up a model-driven application using Dataverse. The app captures information about their computer hardware assets, including their price. Your co-worker is concerned that users of the application are going to forget to populate the cost center if the part is expendable. How could you prevent this? You can use Power Automate to validate that the cost center column value is populated. You can use a business rule to make the cost center field required if the expendable field is true, or you can use a Canvas application instead of a model-driven application. So in this scenario, as I told you, business rule is something that you can do if you want to handle like a different data integrity sets within your Dataverse environment. So here you can use a business rule to make your cost center field required if the expendable field is set as true. So hope these knowledge checks would have given you a bit more understanding about or a recap about our Dataverse module. What's coming up tomorrow? We are going to look at module 4 and 5. We'll be looking at how do we make model-driven apps, as well as this includes a Canvas application, differences between them, what are portal applications, and also we will look at building Power Automate flows in tomorrow's session. So with that note, thanks for attending today's session, and